Good evening and welcome to this meeting of Troy City Council. My name is William Lutz, President of Council. It's Monday, August 15th and it's 7 p.m. and you're in council chambers. We're going to begin tonight's meeting with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Council Member Schilling.
Please stand, please. Where is the middle? Anyone who follows the political news knows that our political system is under significant distress. On the far right are those who no longer believe that the election system is capable of fair counting of our votes, that every election that hasn't chosen their candidate is corrupt and the contested seat was stolen. On the far left are those who feel that our government is not responsive to the needs of our citizens and wants to significantly change the structure and focus of our government efforts to serve. And these are only two examples of the divide. It seems that every year our political leaders deepen the chasm. Neither side is interested in the success of the other, only in the failure. If the far right and far left are considered fringes, then where is the middle? Is it possible that modern members of both sides working together can find solutions to the problems facing our great country through compromise, sharing the credit for the success of solutions found through compromise, and working together for change when programs don't quite reach the expected goals? In my early years in the business world, I was taught that it was never I, but always we. I never accomplished anything without the help of people around me. We accomplished great goals because we did it together. The leadership of our political parties had become eyes, never asking for help or giving credit when due to the other side of the aisle. It is time for the middle to step up, speak up, and put an end to this craziness that is destroying our political system. Let us pray for the end to this craziness. Let us be open and welcoming to those who seek compromise. Let us join together and work together so that together we can find solutions to the problems facing this great nation. Let us be thankful that we live in a great city, Troy, Ohio, that offers so much, that has grown to greatness, not by the efforts of one, but by the efforts of us all. We listen to each other, we work together, we compromise, and in the end, we all benefit. Thank you. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Roselle.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Schilling.
Present.
Mrs. Sneed.
Here.
Mr. Whidden.
Here.
Mrs. Marshall.
Here.
Mr. Pierce.
Present.
Mr. Sievert.
Present.
Mr. Twist.
Here.
All members of council are present.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We'll begin tonight's meeting with a series of public hearings. Our first public hearing is on an Ordinance 042, 2022. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to please read the ordinance.
Ordinance 042, 2022. An ordinance amending Section 1137 and Section 1143 of the zoning code of the City of Troy, Ohio related to the Historic Preservation Overlay District.
If you wish to speak on behalf of this ordinance, you are invited to come to the lectern, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
The only reason I'm bringing this up tonight is because I didn't want to...
Please give your name and
Okay,
address.
sorry, Bill. Riley Barron of Crestwood Drive. I'm bringing my laptop up tonight because I didn't have the time to print off the packet, so I just want to be able to refer to the packet so that I can tell you which sections I'm going to be talking about.
Understood.
Okay, thank you, sir. I would first of all wish to thank the city staff for undertaking this review. I'm sure it was tough and it was hard, and what we have in front of us tonight is a result of that review. So first of all, thanks to city staff for doing so. I want to go back to the reason for a minute why we are here. And it may not sound germane to the topic at hand, but over the course of time, it will be. Back in 2020, a tornado hit downtown and did some damage to several buildings, one of which was 112, 118 East West Main Street building. And as we all know, that's been hotly debated. I can't say too much about that, of course, because it's tied up in court. But that building has led us to where we are now. And I've looked through the zoning code proposals. I see some good things, and I see some things that need to be changed. One of the things that needs to be changed is, in my opinion, Section 10, subsection B, subsection 1. And I'll give you a few minutes to get there if you all have that in front of you before I go further. If you all let me know when you're there. And I'd like to read.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to read paragraph B of section 10. It says, and I quote, "A demolition permit shall not be issued unless accompanied by an approved certificate of appropriateness. The Planning Commission may only approve a certificate of appropriateness if, 1, the applicant has given clear evidence that 2 or more of the following conditions exist." And it goes on to list 4 conditions, okay? I'm not going to go into those for sake of time. Here's my problem with this. We are at this point because of cherry picking. The applicant for 112 to 118 was allowed to cherry pick the criteria so that he could pick the criteria that he knew he could meet. He knew he could not meet 2 of them. He knew he could meet the other 2. Members of council, I have long said since all this started that if we're going to issue a certificate of appropriateness, then all 4 of the conditions must be met. Not just 1, not just 2, not just 3, but all 4. I don't see that here. We are still allowing for cherry picking. So what I am asking you tonight, this is my ask. If we are going to approve this, I am asking you to amend this ordinance to state clearly that all 4 criteria must be met and not just 2. It's very easy to pick the 2 that you know you're going to be able to meet. That's why we're here. If you can't meet all 4, in my way of thinking, you don't get the certificate. So I'm asking you tonight to consider an amendment to this ordinance stating that, simply put, in paragraph 1, remove 2 or more and say all 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on the ordinance? Please come forward, give your name and address.
Ben Southerly, 5474 East State Route 41. And my remarks really are not for or against the changes that are being proposed, but rather to offer some feedback in the spirit of collaboration that Mr. Schilling offered in his invocation. I think that's really key to this process, is to undertake it collaboratively. I serve as president of the board of the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance, which is a 501c3 which advocates for the preservation, restoration, and repurposing of Troy's historic places. My comments this evening are in that capacity, and I also serve as president of the board of the Overfield Tavern Museum. Downtown Troy owes its beauty to the stewardship of many generations of property owners. Maintaining a downtown like ours is a delicate balance, one that can only be achieved when many stakeholders work together. Changing the built environment in our historic downtown is one of the most important duties of the Troy Planning Commission, and it is a responsibility of great interest to the public. Earlier this year, the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance collaborated with Troy Main Street and Troy Community Works to survey Ohio communities and to discuss best practices that could be implemented in our downtown. We met several times from January through April. We built consensus around a range of incentives, educational initiatives, and common sense regulatory reforms to strengthen this culture of stewardship. And at the conclusion of my remarks, I will provide a copy of that document to soon enough copies for all council members. We developed a document that was endorsed by the boards of all three nonprofit organizations, as well as by the boards of the Troy Historical Society and the Overfield Tavern Museum. We would like to speak tonight about the proposed updates to sections 1137 and 1143 of the city zoning code. We appreciate the city's efforts to make the code more objective in certain areas. However, having had the opportunity to review the proposals in depth, we have some concerns. First, we are concerned that the proposed updates to the zoning code would limit the ability of interested stakeholders in the community to file appeals of decisions to demolish historic properties in the downtown. Language about appeals by any interested party has been removed, and only owners of neighboring properties or those across the street or alley may file an appeal under the proposed updates. Second, we are concerned that significant subjectivity would remain in the updated zoning code. The updates introduce new criteria for determining whether a property is historic, and it states that 4 of the 8 criteria must be met. How will it be determined if the criteria have been met? What documentation will be used to determine that? If I could give one example, how do you determine if a local, state, or national event associated with the city with a particular site in Troy is significant? That's a subjective determination. Will there be any consultation by city staff with the local history library or with local organizations such as the THPA? It's worth noting that some of those criteria appear to be modeled on criteria used to determine properties' eligibility for the National Register of Historic Places. For a property to be found eligible for the National Register, only 1 of the 4 criteria has to be met. It seems like meeting 4 out of the 8 criteria might be setting the bar too high and might expose some historic properties downtown to an expedited process that offers those buildings very little protection. Third, the updated zoning changes call for a historic preservation overlay design manual to be put in place. I'm wondering if this design manual will be in place by the time that the moratorium expires in mid-September. The zoning code states when a property owner wants to tear down a building, the reuse plan has to propose new construction that is consistent with this design manual. So I'm hoping that someone can provide some clarification on that. How will these updated zoning regulations be administered starting in September if the design manual is not yet in place? Fourth, we are concerned about the Planning Commission's ability to relax or waive these requirements under 1143.22 N1B5. This creates the possibility of creating significant loopholes. We ask that the council require a supermajority of Planning Commission members to sign off on relaxing or waiving these rules. In addition, we are seeking clarification on a couple of points. First, when there is a proposal to demolish a property, one of the criteria reads as follows. I'm going to read it twice because it's, something you have to give some thought to. That the property proposed for demolition is inherently inconsistent with other properties in between intersecting streets on the same block of the historic district. So I'm going to read that one more time. That this is language from the proposed updates. That the property proposed for demolition is inherently inconsistent with other properties in between intersecting streets on the same block of the historic district. We found this language confusing and asked city staff for clarification. Our understanding from city staff is that, for example, if there were a proposal to demolish this building, which of course there is not, there would be an evaluation of whether this building is inconsistent with other buildings on the west side of South Market Street and between Franklin and Canal Streets. So we're hoping that this could be stated more clearly. For example, could it be stated that the property proposed for demolition is inherently inconsistent with properties within the same block that share frontage on the same streets with the property in question? So in City Hall's case, that would be South Market Street as well as West Franklin Street. Looking at those two streetscapes, are there inconsistencies or not? So we would request that that language be made more clear, and if that is not possible, perhaps an example could be included of what is meant by that, because I think otherwise some confusion could exist. Our other question of clarification involves Section 1143. That currently provides for the establishment of historic preservation overlay districts. Our question is, does it provide for the expansion of an existing historic preservation overlay district? I didn't see that. I might have overlooked that, but our request would be that such language be included as part of the amendments. Like basically what that process looks like if you were to expand the historic preservation overlay district. In closing, we want council and city staff to address these concerns. We appreciate city staff's efforts to bring greater rigor to our zoning code to ensure good stewardship of our historic downtown, which is one of Troy's greatest assets. Nevertheless, as outlined earlier in our remarks, there remains a great deal of subjectivity in what is being proposed. This shows why it is truly vital to have a broad group of perspectives represented on the Troy Planning Commission. Currently, the Planning Commission has no members who live in the Historic Preservation Overlay District downtown or that work at businesses within its boundaries. There are no appointed members of the Planning Commission who own property downtown, no appointed members. Historic preservation interests are not represented, as is a common best practice across communities in Ohio. And the city's own comprehensive plan recommends having representation by historic property owners on the Planning Commission, the city's own comprehensive plan. There is also no architect represented on the Planning Commission that can provide important perspective on these irreplaceable buildings in our downtown. Given these deficiencies and broad community concern about them, we have been assured that there will be a discussion of expanding the Troy Planning Commission at a later date. We look forward to that conversation and trust that it will happen soon. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, this is a public hearing, so not exactly
questions.
the appropriate forum for conversation, but we do appreciate your comments.
You're welcome.
There will be time at the end for a more robust dialogue if you wish to engage at that time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Do any other residents wish to speak on ordinance 042, 2022 this evening?
Hi, good evening. I'm Jessica Meinsinger. My offices are located at 7 South Plum Street, and I'm co-owner of Pop-Up, which is at 4 West Main. And what I want to share with you tonight is how important I think it is, the comments that Mr. Southerly just made on behalf of Troy Historic Preservation Alliance. And I agree, having sat through several of these meetings, being in downtown every day, operating a business in downtown, that it's really important to have more transparency and accountability on the Planning Commission, and that the zoning code and the changes that are being proposed will give the Planning Commission a great deal of subjectivity. I agree with that, and with no representation from downtown business owners, from people who live downtown within the historic overlay district, it's virtually impossible for those of us who live and invest and work downtown to have adequate representation. And I think it would be really eye-opening if city staff, if council directed a survey. I mean, in addition to the Historic Preservation Alliance, the Overfield Tavern Board, Troy Community Works, Troy Historical Society, Troy Main Street, if you were to send out a poll, if you were to get input from downtown businesses and residents as to how they feel about this and the kind of representation they would like to have on the Planning Commission, I think you would have overwhelming support for this. You know, as a downtown business owner, I've been surveyed 5 times in 2022 regarding the DORA and how the DORA has impacted us and our feelings about the DORA. So I would encourage you to do the same thing with something as important as the future of our downtown and the historic district. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other residents who wish to speak on the ordinance this evening? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing on ordinance 042, 2022 closed. And we will open the public hearing on ordinance 044, 2022. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to please read the ordinance.
This is 044-2022, an ordinance changing the zoning of in-lot 8386 from M2 Light Industrial District to a Planned Development Industrial, PDI.
Is there anyone that wishes to speak on the ordinance? You are invited to come to the lectern, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing for ordinance 044-2022 closed. We'll now ask Mrs. Knight to please read a summary of the minutes of the August 1st, 2022 meeting of Troy City Council.
Minutes of council, August 1st, 2022. A public hearing was held on ordinance number 039-2022, rezoning of 1525 Troy Sidney Road. Committee reports. Buildings and Utilities Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing bidding and contracting for the wastewater treatment plant expansion project not to exceed $14 million. Community and Economic Development Committee recommended that council adopt ordinance number 036-2022, rezoning of the Canfarelli annexation. Community Partnerships Committee recommended that legislation be prepared, providing to amend the lease between the city and the CIC. Finance Committee recommended that legislation be prepared authorizing an application for OPWC funds for Phase 2 of the South Stanfield Improvement Project. Safety and Health Committee recommended legislation be prepared that would regulate massage services. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended that legislation be prepared to accept the dedication of 1.021 acres of right-of-way. Law and Ordinance Committee reported on the submittal of 2 liquor license applications with notice from the state. Resolution number R57, 2022, contract for the wastewater treatment plant project, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R58, 2022, apply for OPWC funds, was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 036, 2022, the rezoning of in-lot 11514 was given third reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 039, 2022, changing zoning of in-lot 11513 was given public hearing and second reading. Ordinance number 040, 2022, dedication of right-of-way along Fenner Road and Barnhart Road was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 041, 2022, amended lease with the Community Improvement Corporation regarding Lincoln Community Center, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 042, 2022, amending sections of the zoning code related to Historic Preservation Overlay District, first reading. Ordinance number 043, 2022, establishing regulations for massage services was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 044, 2022, a rezoning to a planned development industrial was given first reading. There was a presentation from Big Brothers and Big Sisters in Wyoming Valley, and following various comments, council then adjourned at 7:54.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. House Council wishes to dispose of the minutes.
Move to adopt.
It's been moved to adopt the minutes by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mr. Rozell. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Whitney?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We'll move on to committee reports. We have 3 committee reports this evening. We'll begin with the Community and Economic Development Committee. Mr. Schilling.
Thank you. The Community and Economic Development Committee met, Mrs. Snee and myself met on August 8th to consider the recommendation from the Troy Planning Commission that in lot 11513, the property known as Sheridan Annex located at 1525 Troy Sidney Road, be rezoned from county zoning of R1AAA, one-family residential, to city zoning of R4, single-family residential district. This committee supports the recommendation of the Planning Commission regarding the proposed rezoning and recommends that council adopt ordinance number 039-2022. And that was respectfully submitted by myself and Mr. Pierce and Mrs. Snee.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll move to the Streets and Sidewalks Committee and Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee members Snee and myself met on August 8th to consider the ordinance of assessment for Phase 13 of the Sidewalk Improvement Program. Phase 13 work has been completed for the area described in the detailed report. No objections were received from the recently published notice. The next step of the process is for council to enact the ordinance of assessment. It is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the final assessment for Phase 13 of the Sidewalk Improvement Program, and this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we have a oral report from the Law and Ordinance Committee and Mrs. Snee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of transfer of the existing D1, D2, D3, D3A, and D6 permits from the name of Strawberry Wings, Inc., doing business as BW3 Buffalo Wild Wings, 2313 West Main Street, to Troy Wing Company, LLC, doing business as Buffalo Wild Wings, of the same address. Chief McKinney has advised that it appears the permit is being transferred from a Thomas and Benidia Mail to Steve Mitchell and Matthias Gruby of Defiance, Ohio. The police department has not recommended an objection or hearing request be filed, and this serves as a notice at the council meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Snee. Are there any comments or questions on the oral report? Seeing none, we'll open it up for audience comments. For items on the agenda, we have 4 ordinances for deliberation, and we've heard 2 reports. If you wish to address council on any of those items, you're welcome to come to the lectern, give your name and address. You have 2 minutes to address council, and Mr. Kerber is our timekeeper. Seeing none, we'll go right into ordinances. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first ordinance of the evening, ordinance 039, 2022.
Ordinance number 039, 2022, an ordinance changing the zoning of in-lot 11513 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the Miami County zoning of R1 AAA, one-family residential, to the city zoning of R4 single-family residence district. This is located at 1525 Troy Sidney Road. It is the Sheridan annexation, has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. Third reading.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Are there any final comments or questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling,
Yes.
Mrs. Snee,
Yes.
Mr. Whidden,
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Sievert,
Yes.
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mr. Rozell,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance 042, 2022.
Ordinance number 042, 2022, an ordinance amending Section 1137 and Section 1143 of the zoning code of the city of Troy, Ohio, related to the Historic Preservation Overlay District. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission and had a public hearing this evening.
In consideration that we've had a public hearing tonight, and there will be a future meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee on Monday, this will stand as the second reading. Are there any comments or questions on the ordinance?
If I may.
Mr. Phillips?
Mr. Titterington, excuse me, the questions that were posed tonight by the speakers at the lectern, will we have potentially have some answers to some of those points that have been made there, questions posed?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance 044, 2022.
Ordinance number 044, 2022, an ordinance changing the zoning of in-lot 8386 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from M2 Light Industrial District to a Planned Development Industrial, PDI. This is located at 2601 West Main Street, has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. There's a public hearing this evening, and it will be a subject of a future committee meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Consideration of the public hearing and a future meeting of the Community Economic Development Committee to provide a report. This will stand as the second reading. Any comments or questions from council members on the ordinance? Seeing none, we'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the last ordinance of the evening, ordinance 045, 2022.
Ordinance number 045, 2022. ordinance levying assessments for Phase 13 of the Sidewalk Improvement Program. This assessment will return approximately $131,869 back to the city, and this is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Rozell. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Are there any final comments or questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Moving on to communications and announcements. Do we have any tonight, Mrs. Knight?
No, sir.
Moving on to comments of officials, Mayor Odom.
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. Director of Public Service and Safety, Mr. Titterington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to remind everyone that Labor Day being a holiday, it's Monday, city buildings will be closed. Refuse and recycling will be on schedule. The dye mill facility will be closed, and the council meeting will be the next evening on September 6th. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Titterington. Moving on, Director of Law, Mr. Kerbert.
I have nothing to add this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Kerbert. Moving on to City Auditor, Mr. Friggy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Friggy. Any council members have any comments this evening that they'd like to add?
I have a comment.
Mr. Seaver.
Just a comment. There's two things that you can never have taken away from you. One is your faith, and the other is your education. In that regard, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Pierce, who obtained his Bachelor of Science degree this week, and congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Twist.
I just wanted to thank all those in public safety members that came out for the National Night Out. I know at Westbrook Park it was very well attended, and I really appreciated the police, fire, Miami Conservatory, all those that attended. So I wanted to thank them for their time.
Thank you, Mr. Twist. Any other council members have any comments? Seeing none, do any staff members have any comments in the audience this evening? Seeing none, we'll move it to audience comments. If you are in the audience and you have anything that you wish to say, now's the time to do it. Come up to the lectern, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Bradley Barringer, 105 Crestwood Drive, once again. First of all, I want to say thanks to Mr. Twist for those kind words about first responders. As a relative of a former fire chief, I can appreciate what our first responders do every day. So thank you for those kind words. I really don't know if a lot of you ever have a chance to look at Facebook, but I have over the last couple days. And there's been recently an explosion of comments about the West Main Street project. In particular, about the decision that was made to remove the lights at Cherry and Cedar Streets. I have to tell you, I know you guys have been sitting on this project for 10 years, as was stated so eloquently by Mayor Oda the other day. But I really have to question the decision of why to take those two lights out. Number one, it's a very busy street. It's a state route. So, I don't see the need to take those lights out. Second of all, I don't know if you've ever tried to cross Main Street traffic. It's daggone near impossible. And I'm going to say this, and I know a lot of you weren't on council 10 years ago. I'm just waiting for the first accident to happen in either one of these intersections, because I'm going to be right back up here saying those four little words everybody hates to hear. I told you so. I told you so. Folks, I work on Main Street. I see the traffic. It's a very busy street. I don't know why the decision was made to take those out. And I don't know why it was never questioned by this council or the past council, because, as I said, a lot of you were not on council at the time this was started 10 years ago. Did it have to be approved with those two lights being removed? I mean, where was the thought process in this? This was just a bad decision all the way around. But the barn door has been closed, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's a fait accompli, it's a done deal. Or maybe it isn't, I don't know. I don't sit up and make those decisions, that's what you guys are for. Uneasy lies the head that makes the decisions, because you know you're going to catch the flack. And Mr. Lutz and I had a very nice conversation, and I thank you for that, Bill.
You're welcome.
It's always nice to know I can have a good conversation with you when we need to. But I just really have to question why that was never questioned 10 years ago. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone care to respond? Any other residents have anything that they wish to add at this time? Please come forward and give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Jessica Abel, 2900 Corporate Drive. I'm representing Randall residents of Troy, and I may have missed my boat because I was talking about the rezoning. Can I still do that or no?
You can speak about whatever you wish to speak about.
Okay.
So, yes, go right ahead.
So our owners are questioning what the Professional Associates Incorporated would like to do with the area. That is.
Can anyone on staff provide guidance?
I'm sorry, what are we talking
It
about?
this be the
is
one on West Main Street?
8386.
Oh, that's the storage area, right, Tim? Yeah.
No, it's the empty lot on 41.
Right,
Okay.
yes. That's their intent.
It's a
Yes,
storage area?
That's the current plan that they've submitted or have been talking to staff about, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Let me ask your name again, please.
Jessica Abel.
Thank you.
ABEL?
ABEL.
Any other residents wish to address council tonight? Please come forward, give your name and address.